I'm Miyoko Schinner. I'm the founder of Miyoko's. I'm also the founder of Rancho Compasión, a farmed animal sanctuary, and I'm a co-founder of LEAP, Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet. I went vegan so many years ago at a time when people weren't vegan, sometime in the 1980s. I don't even remember when. I'd been a vegetarian since I was 12 years old, and in my mid-20s, I read an article that was in Vegetarian Times about the dairy industry, and I had always thought that they were happy cows just grazing in the grasses of gas. Anyway, and it turned out they weren't. And it made me really think about if I really loved animals, and the reason I didn't eat animals was because I would always tell my friends, for me to live, why do others have to be killed? And that was my argument. And I didn't realize that the dairy industry was culpable for the deaths of most of the cows in the United States. And we have 100 million cows in the United States, and most of them are dairy cows. And they all end up on your plate at some point. And people just don't realize that. And they suffer so much more before they die.
Now, how did you know it was safe, though, to not eat animals? I mean, surely people do this because they think they need to.
It was really sort of intuitive that I understood that there was no problem with going vegan. There were some doubts in my mind, but I had to keep reminding myself that I'd been raised in Japan, in a country that had largely been vegan for most of history. So Japan, by royal decree, had been a vegan country for 800 years because it was Buddhist, and there were no dairy products. Dairy is not part of the history of most of Asia. It's a relatively new phenomenon. And so if you didn't eat meat or you didn't eat eggs, then you were primarily vegan. And if you just think about the fact that through monasteries throughout Asia for thousands of years, people have been vegan. And if you think about the fact that 2/3 of the world doesn't consume dairy, and 2/3 of the world, well, actually most of the world, even in European history, until recently, had a vegan diet. And we forget about that because we think the way that Americans eat today is the way we've eaten for history, for most of history, and it's simply false. We're so myopic about our understanding of what humans have been eating. So when I went vegan, I knew it was safe. The time that I doubted it was when I had my first child, and I wasn't sure. For some reason, this was back, my oldest son is 32 years old. 32 years ago, it was pre-internet, there wasn't a lot of information. And so there was a question in my mind, can I raise him vegan? And so occasionally I would feed him dairy products. And I didn't raise him 100% vegan. But I was vegan during my pregnancy with my third child. I was vegan with all my pregnancies. I was nursing my second child while I was pregnant with my third child. And the doctors called me into their office to test me for iron deficiency. They were convinced that as a vegan, a nursing mom who was pregnant, that I must be iron deficient. And they were shocked to find that my iron levels were so high.
Now, did you decide with those children to raise them vegan?
My kids were raised vegan at home. I did not restrict what they ate outside of the home. They're vegan now, by choice. I did make sure they knew they were vegetarian. They've never had meat. But when they went out, it was at a time when there wasn't a lot of veganism was a really new thing, even in the United States when they were growing up. And I was afraid there'd be a backlash if I let them, let's say, go to a birthday party and not have birthday cake, that sort of thing. Yeah. So I wish I'd been stronger, but that's the reality.
It sounds like you did a good job nonetheless. Now, you mentioned Japan. Most of us have heard of the blue zones. Were you in a place that was considered a blue zone?
The blue zone in Japan is Okinawa, and I was raised outside of Tokyo, between Tokyo and Yokohama. And I was just a little kid, but I would have to say that, our diet was relatively vegetable-based. There was some fish, mostly rice-based. I didn't have dairy until I moved to the United States when I was about 7 years old. Japan at the time, meat was a luxury. It was something that you had once in a great while. You might have tonkatsu, which is deep fried pork. And it was a specialty thing. It was not something that you had on a regular basis. So considering that I went vegetarian when I was 12 years old, there was really only like a 5-year period when I ate meat on a regular basis in my life.
When people look up where people live the longest, maybe not necessarily the most centenarians, but where they live the longest, there's some confusion because they eat a lot of pork.
I don't think they did traditionally. I think traditionally they ate a lot of satsuma imo, which is sweet potato, roasted sweet potato. That is a foundation of their diet. They did eat, when you say they eat a lot of pork, nobody ate a lot of pork back, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. There was a lack of refrigeration, for one thing. Animals are expensive to have to feed. And so it was much easier to eat things that grew from the ground, because cycling it through an animal was a whole process.
So the sweet potato, is it like 80% of their traditional diet?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it was rice and sweet potatoes. And I will let you know, sweet potatoes are akin to ice cream to kids in Japan. Yeah. So when I was growing up, there'd be the sweet potato man that would roll his coal-laden cart down the street, and he would cry out, "Ishiaki imo," and he would just sing that song. This cry, which just means fire-roasted potatoes, basically, roasted on hot stones. And we would just run out into the street. We would get a few yen from our parents, and we would run out into the street and buy one of these smoky, hot, sweet potatoes. And that was ice cream to us. That was a real treat, because Japanese sweet potatoes are so sweet.
Yes, I love them.
Yes.
There's a co-op where I get them, and they're
yes,
my
they're
favorites.
wonderful.
That is so intriguing how it was like an ice cream truck. I would have never thought that. How did they prepare it?
They buried the sweet potatoes in coal, and they were cooked in the hot coal. And so they were roasted, and they were smoky, and they were charred on the outside, and they were hot. They were absolutely delicious. I think every culture has its own specialties. To a Japanese kid, something that is akin to macaroni and cheese would be curry rice, which is, it does have meat in it, but it also has vegetables and it's rice. It's still, I would say, healthier overall than something like mac and cheese. You're not getting the hormones of that, or pizza. Every culture has its own special foods that define it. That the kids grow up on. And we all have our own comfort foods. For me, rice is a comfort food. I eat rice almost every day. And when I'm stressed out and I want something, I want rice. I want rice with seaweed, or I want rice with natto, which is fermented soybeans. That and some green tea, that to me just makes me feel whole.
One of the characteristics of a blue zone is having basically a tribe of 7 on average people that you grow up with through your whole life. Was that the case with you there?
I left Japan when I was about 7 years old. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, I would say the familial ties in Japan are very, very strong. And they are in many other parts of the world too, such as Italy, which is another area that has the blue zone, Sardinia. Yeah. And what we're missing in this country, and I think one of the potential downfalls of this country, is that we have disassociated food from family and food from community. We eat food alone. We go through a drive-in and we eat a hamburger in the car. We get a sandwich and we eat it in front of our computers while we're working. We don't even have family meals anymore in most families. People are always on the go, and food is just a form of sustenance. It's not something that brings communities together. And that's something that I think is extremely sad, that is going to harm humankind, society, community. We have to bring that conviviality back into our lives and celebrate food together, which is what the tribes in Japan and Italy, everything is centered around food. It's not just about when you need help or, when you need to put up a shelf or something like that. It's all centered around eating and sharing and breaking bread and cooking rice together and making mochi and all of these festivities that have always centered around food. And we're missing that in the United States, and this is going to be very, very harmful to humanity.
And we're a very individualistic
We're
country.
too individualistic.
Yeah. And they say on average we have like 1.5 friends that we grow up with through our life.
Oh my gosh, that is really, really sad. And families are breaking up. I think what we eat is important, but how we eat it is equally important. That we eat it with others, and we use food as an act of love to share with others.
You're making me think of like when you're vegan, it even makes it harder because now you're even in a smaller circle, if one at all, right? Was that hard for you, being vegan so long?
I went vegan in my mid-20s, and I decided at that time that I was just going to invite everyone to my house. I started having dinner parties every Friday night and inviting different groups of people. Every Thanksgiving, I hosted the Thanksgiving dinner for my family and their friends. And I just decided I'm just going to cook for everyone. I'm just going to serve everyone. And I have always had a big dinner table with many, many people around it. And through the act of giving food, which is an act of love, I have been able to convert so many people to veganism because they come, they eat, they express joy, and they say, I want part of this.
Through that process, is this how you've evolved into maybe experimenting with food and getting to the point of creating the foods that you create and sell?
Yeah, when I was in my mid-20s, I went vegan, and my goal at that point was to figure out, how do I make the foods that I enjoy? I lived in Japan at the time, and I really, really had developed a taste for rich and unctuous French and Italian cuisine, which was prevalent in Japan at the time. And I had to figure out, how can I replicate these? And so I got into my kitchen and I started experimenting. And that's when I started having these dinner parties and inviting people over and trying different dishes on them. It culminated in a cookbook that I wrote in Japanese and I translated to English. It came out in 1990. I moved back to the United States, opened a bakery, then a restaurant, and then had another alt meat company back in the 90s. And my whole life has been around, how can I create these foods that everybody thinks isn't possible as vegan? It's always been the greatest challenge for me to prove to the world that you can make everything that you enjoy, the highest quality premium foods, but you can make them vegan and you can make them better.
Yeah. And one of the things that I find awesome about what you're doing is, in these interviews I've done, so many of them, but one of the hardest things is giving up the very foods that you've created. People are like, they always mention you. Your name comes up constantly. But the people who don't know your foods are like, cheese is the hardest thing to get rid of. So you've been quintessential to like the solution of transitioning into this. It's an extreme honor. I didn't anticipate having you in front of my cameras, but it's an extreme honor. And are you aware of how incredible what you're doing is? I mean, you must be from the sales. I mean, do you get a lot of fan mail, or how do people respond when they see you? And I'm sure you must get a lot of like appreciation for your work.
Well, honestly, what makes me the happiest is having people say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me go vegan.
Yeah.
I met a woman today who said, you're the reason I went vegan. I found your book and the Homemade Vegan Pantry, and I learned how to make all this stuff, and it helped me go vegan. Yeah. And that's been my mission since I went vegan, was if I could just show people that you can eat just as well, but do it without harming any animals, then why wouldn't you do that? And so that has been my mission, is to recreate everything that people are used to eating, that is a celebration of life, and make it vegan and as whole foods as possible.
Yeah. And so you've got this book, you've got your
I have
products.
6 books.
6
Yeah.
books, wow. And you have these products. How vast is your product line?
Well, we're in about, I don't know how many stores. We're in 30, 40,000 stores.
And different types of products.
We have different types of, I think we have about 19, 20 products. Yeah.
And what are they like?
So our European style cultured vegan butter is the best selling plant-based butter in the country. We have cheese wheels that you could put on a cheese platter. We have a mozzarella that's the best selling mozzarella in the country. We have a new product. It's a liquid vegan pizza mozzarella. It's actually a liquid mozzarella you pour on pizza or lasagna, and it cooks up just like dairy cheese. It's wonderful. Cream cheese. We have an oat butter that's really delicious.
What is the most popular store that we can find these products at?
Whole Foods, I don't know, Walmart, Target,
cool.
Publix. I don't know where you're from, but yeah.
Is there any up-and-coming products that we can be kind of on the lookout for? Anything new coming?
Yeah, I can't really, we've got some new stuff coming out, but
I'm curious, do you think you'll ever do an ice cream?
I don't think ice cream is in our, I mean, there's a lot of ice cream companies. Yeah. I think there's some good stuff out there, yeah.
And then now your sanctuary, what about that?
I founded a sanctuary called Rancho Compasión about 6 years ago. We're in NorCal, and we're home to about 100 animals, and we have humane education and work days, and we put on a film festival actually called the Mindful Eating Film Festival once a year. This year in August we held it, and we screened the West Coast premiere of The Smell of Money, which is showing tomorrow night, and we had a big gala around that. So, our mission isn't just to rescue animals, but to reach out to our community in ways that might get them to come and learn about animal agriculture.
And now, can people learn more about all of these things in one place online?
No, they're different organizations. So, I mean, they can go to miyokos.com. They can go to ranchocompasion.org. And then I started a new nonprofit co-founded a new nonprofit with two other sanctuary founders called LEAP, Leaders for Ethics, Animals, and the Planet, which you can go to leap4animals.org with a number 4. And that's a new organization that we're hoping to be national, which is to be an alternative to 4-H and FFA, to connect students with sanctuaries and help them with hands-on projects at sanctuaries that can teach them about humane education, veganic agriculture, the future of food, and animal care, veterinary care.
Awesome. And right now you're at the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit. What are you doing here? Are you doing a talk?
I've given 2 talks here at the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit. I was part of the keynote this evening and gave another talk yesterday as part of a film series, TV series called Eating Plants. And I'm just connecting with a lot of people and really having a wonderful time.